everyone, it's Miss Terry, and today I'm going to talk about some new selections in the genre of war and conspiracy. This first title is called Enduring Freedom, and this is about 19-year-old Joe Killian, whose Iowa National Guard unit has been deployed to Afghanistan. The year is 2003, and he's hoping that he's going to see some action. He's hoping that he's going to be able to write about the story of war over in Afghanistan. And when he first arrives, he just thinks that this is a country in trouble and that's just very savage and backwatered, and he really has no respect for the people who live there. And he ends up living in a safe house next to Bahir's family. Bahir is 16-year-old, and he comes over to talk to the soldiers in the hopes of practicing his English. And that's where a friendship begins to form between Bahir and Joe. And they both come to realize that they actually have more in common than they realize. This book is a really good look at what it's like to be a part of a country that is perpetually at war, and what actually is happening with the Afghan people while our soldiers are there. So it's called Enduring Freedom. This next one is by Chris Lynch. This one is called Special Forces, Unconventional Warfare. And this is about a young man named Danny, who's really kind of a hothead. He gets into a lot of trouble. He tries not to get in fights, but he just can't seem to stay out of trouble. And after stealing a motorcycle, the judge decides to send him to the army, and he ends up in a very secretive special forces unit that is illegally fighting in Vietnam, in Laos. And this is the story of his relationship with his fellow soldiers and really coming to terms with some of the things that his unit is doing overseas, and really the violent nature of war in general. So it's called Special Forces. This next one is called An Emotion of Great Delight, and this is about a girl named Shadi. She is a high school senior in the year 2003, so just a little bit after 9/11, when the U.S. has declared war on Iraq, and she's an Iranian-American Muslim. She wears her hijab, and she's just trying to keep her head down because crimes against Muslims are on the rise, but she has even more stress than that going on in her life. Her brother has just died in a car accident. Her dad is in the hospital from a massive heart attack. Her mom's mental stability is not doing so great, and her best friend Zahara has just kind of dumped her, and she doesn't really know why. And then her brother decides that he's going to comfort her, and his name is Ali. And Ali is really there for Shadi, and they start to have feelings for each other. But this book really takes a look at what is happening stateside when our country is off at war somewhere else. It's an emotion of great delight. This next one by Todd Strasser is called The Good War, and this is a story about a high school where for extra credit, students can join the esports team led by Ms. B, and they have decided to play a game called The Good War, which is a World War II kind of simulation game. And already the club has been divided into two teams, the Axis and the Allies, and they are playing pretty regularly. And it doesn't take long before the game leaks into the rest of the high school, to the point where some of the Axis team is starting to wear some of the hateful images of the Nazis throughout the day, and really taking on the persona of the video game characters they are playing, and what that does to the student body and to the community. It's called The Good War. These next two are by the same author, Elizabeth Wine, and first one is called Codename Verity, and this is a story about a girl named Julia who actually is a wireless operator for the British, who ends up crash landing in France and taken prisoner by the Nazis. And this book is told from her point of view as she's basically being tortured for information, and she starts to give up little bits of code to the enemy in order to get a reprieve from that torture, and also to kind of hold off the execution that they are promising her. It's also told from the point of view of her friend Maddie, who is desperately trying to rescue her friend from the clutches of the Nazis. So that's called Codename Verity. And then another book also taking place during World War II. This one is called The Enigma Game, and this is about a 15-year-old Jamaican-born Londoner named Louisa, whose parents were killed in the bombing of London. And she's just trying to kind of find a new place for herself. She's got to be able to, pay for a living. So she ends up taking a job in a small Scottish community with a kind of an old opera singer. And their house is very close to an Air Force base. And Louisa really wants to help the war effort. She really wants to bring down the Nazis. She's feeling the loss of her parents and really wants to be helpful. When a German soldier ends up crashing near the airbase and leaving behind an Enigma machine, which is actually how the Germans were creating their codes during World War II, and he accidentally left a key to how to solve the codes. And Louisa decides that she's going to try to help the good guys break some of the codes and get some information for the right side. It's called the Enigma Game. This next one is called Soldier Boy, and this takes place in actually two different time periods. So the first part is 1989. 14-year-old Ricky, his family has been murdered except for his brother, and he ends up getting taken, I want to say drafted, but really he gets forced into becoming a soldier for the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA. This book takes place in Uganda, sorry, I couldn't remember, in Uganda, and it also jumps forward to the year 2006, and 11-year-old Samuel, who is also a member of the LRA, he ends up getting wounded pretty seriously, and he gets rescued by a group that sends him to an orphan camp. Well, Samuel doesn't really understand that he's been rescued. He thinks that he's being held captive, and he feels desperate to get back to his LRA fighters and go back to war. Unfortunately, that's really not a good place for him, and he would be better off staying exactly where he is. So this is kind of told back and forth between those two time periods of two different viewpoints of boy soldiers and the cruelty of war. This next one is kind of a sci-fi take on a war book. This one is called The Shadow War, and this is about 5 different teens, the first of which is Liam, and he has discovered that there is an alternate dimension where some small bits of power could be used to possibly take down the Nazi regime. And unfortunately, his research gets stolen, and especially the book that tells him how to do it, especially how to do like a really big power grab, so maybe it really could turn the tide of the war. So he enlists the help of Daniel and Rebecca. Both are Jewish teens whose parents were killed by the Nazis. And basically they've been hunting down Nazi soldiers and killing them, but they agreed to help Liam get this book back. It's unfortunately in the hands of the Nazis, and it's not going to be easy. And outside the war camp where it has been hidden, they bump into 2 other teams, Philip and Simone, who are part of the French resistance. And unfortunately, when they steal the book back, they end up opening a portal that allows some monsters to come through. So not only are they battling the Nazis, they're also battling these horrible monsters. So it's called The Shadow War. This next one is called Prepped. I'd put this more in this conspiracy category. And this is about a girl named Becca, who is desperately trying to get out of the home life that she is currently living in, which is with a group of doomsday preppers that are convinced that the end of the world is near. So instead of going to prom and doing fun things like that for high school, she is constantly doing survival training. She does have a boyfriend. His name is Roy Kang. She's kind of been fake dating him for the last 5 years just to appease her father. He is from another doomsday family. And when her father ends up getting sick, she realizes that maybe there are more important things than what she imagines her life could be, and she might need to stick around a little bit longer. So it's called Prepped. The final story I have is called Blood Red, Snow White, and this follows the life of author-journalist Arthur Ransom in St. Petersburg in 1913, and he was a journalist that was interested in telling the story of the Russian Revolution, and he ends up leaving his wife and daughter and learning to speak Russia and going around the countryside collecting stories. Well, he ends up falling for the secretary to Trotsky's personal secretary. Her name is Eugenia, and she is kind of been looked at in history as the possibility of being a spy. And so now he's kind of into that political intrigue and the information exchange of what it means to be a spy, as he's also trying to rescue his new love from the hands of the Russians. So that's Blood Red, Snow White. Enjoy.